Pirates, I can reject everything. 61 to 80. 061. The beautiful bartender, Meaty, appears. Arkin carried two strangely shaped weapons, ignored the gazes of the people around him, and walked slowly to Chris. Captain Chris, my name is Akin, and I now request to join the Chris Pirates. His tone was cold, his demeanor was extremely cold, and at first glance he knew that he was a ruthless character. Bassos looked him up and down and said with a sneer, "Your name is Ajin, why do you look so weak and ugly?" Poison Q laughed. He has a very cold personality, he must be a ruthless guy. From the looks of it, he will join us today. Hawkins was playing cards, looking like a dead man, and said something in a low voice. Lafitte adjusted his top hat, and the gentleman said, having the courage to stand up, this in itself shows that he is good. Queen Sweetheart looked at Betty and whispered, this man is so dark and looks like a villain. What does that matter? No matter how fierce he is, he can be compared to Chris. Betty shrugged and said something casually. Listening to the conversation between the two of them, Bakara couldn't help but rolled her eyes and said angrily, "What are you talking about? You describe Chris like a bandit." At this time, Chris looked at Lafitte and said calmly, "Tell him about it." Akin looked at Lafitte with a puzzled expression, not knowing what Chris meant by this. First of all, congratulations on joining the Chris Pirates. Lafitte stood up and said politely, I'm Lafitte, the deputy captain of the regiment. Next, I will tell you about the rules of the ship. Hearing Lafitte's words, Bashes shook his head, very helpless. Deputy captain of this regiment, I have to add these words every time, I like to show off too much. It's only a few times left, and after a while, this position will be mine. Poison Q looked at Lafitte's figure and said with a mysterious smile. Hawkins looked at him and said deadly, you are not destined to be a co-captain from your bones. Luo cried with the demon sword in his arms, nodded and said in agreement, although he has the ability of the natural system, compared with Lafitte, the gap is still very large. Lieutenant Lafitte, the rules of this ship suit me too well. Ajin's eyes were ruthless, and he smiled cruelly and said, we are pirates, how can we obey the rules? Everything is still spoken with fists. The surrounding guests were very surprised when they heard Lafitte say such a terrifying ship rule, and they talked in a low voice. Is this really a pirate? There are still various battles, it's too scary. I don't know, this group of pirates is really weird, I've never seen anything like this before. The ship has been fighting all the time. If you say that, then this young captain must be very strong, or he will be replaced soon. It's too dangerous here, let's get out of here. Likewise, Jep was shocked when he heard these words. He had never heard or seen such a strange boat rule. Then he will enter the Great Waterway. I really look forward to what kind of name he will make. He himself is very optimistic about Chris, and thinks that this young man will definitely be a big man in the future. At this moment, a pleasant voice sounded. Captain Chris, I want to join you too. I saw a slender woman with pale blonde hair walking slowly to Chris. She's got a nice name, Maddie. True to her name, she is indeed a very beautiful woman. This time, the guests were really stunned. Such a beautiful woman who is like a flower and a jade actually joined the pirate group. And it's active and willing. It really makes them feel very sorry, and at the same time is full of envy for Chris. This young man is full of beauty and happiness, surrounded by beautiful women. It's so special that it's not human. Captain Chris, my name is Meaty, and I am a professional bartender. If I get on the boat, I can mix all the fine wines everyone drinks in the future. Meaty stroked her hair and looked at Chris with her beautiful eyes. A sweet and lovely smile bloomed on her pretty face, and she looked really beautiful. Bassos immediately became interested, laughed and said, this is good, it's really good. There's a bartender missing on the boat. Now I don't have to worry about drinking, way ha ha ha. Poison Q coughed, there are musicians and bartenders, and the crew is getting more and more uniform. Lafitte turned his cane and said happily, you have come at a good time, you really need such a person on board. Captain, what do you think? Chris put his arms around him and softly spit out 2 words, yes. Hearing Chris say this, Meidi's pretty face showed a gentle and sweet smile, and said happily, thank you, Captain, please take care of everyone in the future. The guests saw this beautiful woman and really joined the pirate group. One by one very depressed, heartbroken. How could such a beautiful woman fall into such a dirty place, it's a pity. At this time, Queen Sweetheart looked at Meidi, waved her hand, and said with a smile, come and sit here, let's have a good chat. Meidi, Betty, and the old lady's name are only 1 word apart. It's a coincidence. Betty leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, took a breath, and her pretty face seemed a little dissatisfied. Baccarat folded her crimson hair and said with a sweet smile, it's really a coincidence, but it's nothing, we won't call it wrong. Okay, everyone is very talkative, and I just want to chat with the sisters. Meidi raised her eyebrows, smiled, and walked towards Queen Sweetheart. 062, Sanji, do you still remember the parting message your sister gave you? Bharati Sea Restaurant, somewhere on the outskirts. Sanji, how have you been all these years? Leiju looked at this younger brother with concern in her beautiful eyes, and said in a very gentle tone. Sanji took a breath, looked at the sea level in front of him, and said coldly, thanks to you, I won't die. Leiju was very clear about the tone of his younger brother's words, and knew that he still hated the Vinsmoke family. Also, Sanji was bullied by his brothers when he was young, and he was often beaten by them. And Gage doesn't like him, hates him very much. What Germa left him was only deep pain, which he definitely didn't want to think about. Sanji, have you forgotten what Big Sister did to you in the past? Leiju rubbed her fair forehead and said with a wry smile, my sister doesn't say much about family matters. But what elder sister treats you, you must know very well in your heart, please don't talk to elder sister in this tone. Hearing Reiju's words, Sanji fell into silence, recalling Reiju's parting words in his mind. The sea is so wide that one day you will meet gentle people. Thinking back to the past, Sanji finally spit out the smoke from his mouth and turned to look at Reiju with an apologetic look. Seeing you brings back bad memories, please forgive me Leiju, sorry. Seeing him like this, Leiju was very happy, and she couldn't help showing a gentle smile on her face. You don't blame me, my sister is really happy, very happy. At this time, Sanji took a breath, asked his doubts, and said, Leiju, you are not in Beihai, why did you come here? Father. Thinking it was not good to mention this, Leiju folded her pink hair and smiled, the young man in black clothes and black pants who was in the lead just now, his name is Chris. At home now, I'm cooperating with him. So I was assigned to supervise and be responsible for the cooperation between the two sides. It's good to say, fortunately, I followed him to the East China Sea, otherwise my sister wouldn't even know you were here. Sanji frowned and said incredulously, how could that cold-blooded guy cooperate with Chris? Is there something wrong here? Reiju knew very well who the person Sanji was referring to was. She didn't care, she blinked her beautiful eyes, and said gently and generously, because Chris is too strong, the family considered cooperating with him, and there is no other reason. By the way, Sanji, leave here with your sister, and let's go to the Great Channel together. Leiju said with a smile, Chris is very talkative, if you can join, he must be very. Before he could finish speaking, Sanji interrupted him directly. You needn't say it, I can't leave here. Sanji flicked the cigarette butt into the sea, looked at Reiju and said seriously, you should have seen that old guy just now. His name is Zap, and if it weren't for him, I would have been buried at sea. So, no matter what, I'll be here with him and it's impossible to leave. Reiju frowned her beautiful eyebrows and wanted to continue to persuade, but she could see Sanji's decisive appearance. She can only give up. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. Derry Road Nord, Sabaru. I suddenly realized that this one is really shabby compared to our ship. Karina looked at the main ship and shook her head with a look of disgust. Corona floated in the air and said with a smile, "It goes without saying that our ship is the pirate ship of the Overlord of the North Sea. How can such a small place in the East China Sea compare to us?" At this moment, Karina's beautiful eyes lit up, a smile appeared on her pretty face, and she said excitedly, "I found it, I finally saw the storage room, tilde. Corona was also interested, and quickly said, "Then let's hurry over there, Haley. Then, the two quickly walked forward, full of interest, and stepped in. When I entered my eyes, I saw a woman in front of me, who was packing gold and silver jewelry. Nami heard the voice and looked towards the door, just in time to meet the two of them. The air seemed to quiet down. "Hey, why is there a person here?" Corona was flying in the air with a curious look on her face. Could it be the survivors of this ship? Probably not. Karina looked at Nami with a sly look in her beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, "This is a person of the same kind. She, like me, is a fan of petty money, and I can see it at a glance." Nami looked at Karina and laughed, "You're here to steal too, what a coincidence. There is a lot of treasure here, I can't finish it, you can steal it. I'm in a hurry, so I'm not worthy of you, so I'll withdraw first. After that, I tied the package and planned to leave here." Karina waved her hand and said with a giggling smile, "I'm sorry, although we are of the same kind, but the two of us are not here to steal things. The things on this ship are all the spoils of our Chris pirates. You are stealing our treasure. But seeing that you like me very much, this girl will spare you." Corona looked at the large packages full of them, with a happy look on her face. "With these treasures, I can buy a lot of delicious food again, Haley tilde. Nami's eyes kept flickering, she thought quickly, and said with a smile, "Haha, so these things belong to you. Well, if that's the case, then I shouldn't take it and return it to the original owner. By the way, should we cooperate or not? Let's have a big fight, how about it?" For the woman in front of her, Nami's impression of her is really very good. The personalities of the two people are very similar, and they both like money. The most important thing is that both of them are very clever, and both are quite witty. It would be a pity if we didn't cooperate. This guy, Sanji, is too lustful, he must not be allowed to board the ship, there is no doubt about this. So readers who like Sanji, the author can only say sorry, *. 063. Nami, Chris is very strong and can help you kill the dragon. No, I still like it the way it is now. Karina shook her head slightly and said with a smile, "I used to do it alone, and it was very interesting. But now I've discovered that following Chris's words, the treasures that can be grabbed are much more than before. Like some time ago, after we killed the White Ghost Pirates, the Overlord of the North Sea. Stain, there are so many treasures, they are all piled up into a hill. It's the first time I've seen so many treasures." Karina looked at Nami with sincerity in her eyes, and invited her, "Come with us, when Chris takes down the pirate group, we will be responsible for the sweep, tilde. Corona floated in the air, and quickly said, and me. Nami rubbed her forehead and smiled wryly, showing a lack of interest. "Forget it, I'll do it alone and withdraw first." After speaking, he was ready to turn around and leave. Karina frowned, her eyes flashed with wisdom, and she asked suspiciously, "Have you encountered any difficulties? Tell us about it, maybe we can help you. It's rare to meet someone who likes me so much. Everyone should help each other, shouldn't they?" Corona nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, I also like her very much, you should join us, Haley ha. Nami stopped, her beautiful eyes flickering, and her mind kept analyzing. This group of people is so powerful, maybe they can really help themselves. Thank you for caring about me so much, then let me tell you about my situation." Nami turned to look at the two of them, shook her head, and said with emotion, "Actually, the reason why I came out to steal is to make up for 100 million Baileys. My village, Kokoja village, has been occupied by the goddamn Murlocs, bullying us every day and not treating us as human beings at all. But the Murlocs promised me that as long as I can hand over 100 million Baileys, they will spare my village. Nami clenched her small fists, cheered herself up, and said confidently, as long as I keep working hard, it will take a few years to make up this amount. Karina and Verona looked at each other and finally understood what was going on. It's easy to handle, it doesn't need to be so troublesome at all. Karina shrugged her shoulders, smiled and said, I'll tell Chris in a moment and go straight to destroy those Murlocs, so that's fine. Then you follow me on the boat, and we will join forces in the future, hee tilde. Verona nodded and said with a smile, that's right, no matter what Murloc he is vulnerable in front of Chris. As long as Chris is willing to go out, it's not about killing them in minutes. Nami waved her hand, explained it, and said worriedly, the dragon, the leader of these Murlocs, has a bounty of 20 million Baileys, and is the pirate with the highest bounty in the East China Sea. His strength is so powerful, and there are many powerful Murlocs under his command. Can you really defeat them? Karina tucked her hair together and said casually, don't worry about this. Didn't I just say that the Beihai overlord has been killed by us? Do you know how much he offered a reward? 83 million. This evil dragon has a mere 20 million yuan. It's rubbish to death. It's not a matter of minutes to beat him. Verona flew around in the air and gave a silver bell-like laugh, and last time, Chris didn't take any shots when he killed the North Sea overlord. There are more than 80 million pirates, and our captain despised them. The evil dragon you mentioned, our captain despised even more. Okay, let's go back quickly, don't babble. Hearing what the two of them said, Nami was shocked. More than 80 million. What a horrible bounty. She couldn't even think about it. Okay, it's amazing. Nami came back to her senses. Her pretty face was full of horror, she was really shocked. In her opinion, the dragon with a bounty of 20 million is already too strong. Unstoppable. As for more than 80 million, what kind of existence is this? It is too scary. Then, the three of them did not hesitate, chatted and walked outside. Inside the Bharati restaurant. Yes, it's really good. The Queen Sweetheart looked at such a sumptuous meal on the table, with a happy look on her beautiful face, and said with emotion, it's really delicious, it's great. Betty had finished eating, leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, took a breath and said something. The taste is really delicious, it is indeed the most famous restaurant in Donghai. Needy looked at them, smiled and said, unfortunately, there are no conditions now. If you don't have some wine for everyone, it will be more atmosphere. Leiju had been back for a while. Maimyu looked at Needy and said something with a smile. Don't worry, there will be more opportunities like this in the future. I'm looking forward to the fine wine you make. It must be very fragrant and tasteful. Vashis patted the table, looked at Chris and laughed and said, Captain, why don't you tie these chefs, and let them cook for us every day in the future? Poison Q coughed and smiled strangely, this idea is very good, if they don't agree, then kill them. You two, stop talking nonsense. Top Hatton said gently, didn't Reiju say just now that her brother is in this restaurant? Leiju is our partner, if you dare to mess around, I will kill you without the captain's action. After all, the plan is the most important thing. If anyone dares to stop it, I will be the first to refuse. 064, Genius Navigator, Nami joins. At this time, a few footsteps came, and I saw Karina and three people walking slowly. Chris, I pulled someone over and she wants to join us too. Karina looked at Chris, blinked her beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, her name is Nami, she is a talented navigator, she can observe the weather and draw island maps. In short, she is very powerful, and she can definitely play a big role in our team. Perona floated in the air, nodded her head, and said with a smile, that's right, she's been reading books about sailing since she was a child, and she can draw maps of various islands at the age of 10. Zizhui, it's really amazing, a genius, Haley ha 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 tilde tilde. After the two of them had finished introducing themselves, Nami quickly bowed to Chris and said something in a very respectful tone. Captain Chris, if you let me join the pirates, I will definitely use my talents to provide everyone with the best sailing route. But, Nami looked at Chris, clenched her hands, and said nervously, before joining, can you help me with a trouble, please, Captain? Karina hurriedly took her words and took the initiative to explain. That's it, Nami's village, Kokoja village is in trouble. It was ruled by the fish people and bullied the people in the village every day. It was very cruel. These murlocs are so abhorrent, they dare to bully humans. Chris, let's kill them, let's see if they dare to be so arrogant. Perona nodded again and said with a smile, that's right, Murloc, I've never seen one before, Haley ha 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 tilde tilde. Bashes shrugged his shoulders and laughed loudly, it's the first time a newcomer has come across a condition. Captain, don't worry about her, it's her honor to be able to join us. She dares to put forward conditions, who is she? Poison Q smiled strangely, he said, no, let her on board, such a good sailing talent can't be wasted. As for helping her with the affairs in the village, don't worry about it, as long as she gets on the boat, can she still go down, he tilde tilde. Hawkins was as dead as ever and said calmly, from the looks of it, she will join us today. Lafitte smiled slightly, and said very gentlemanly, if a man joins and dares to make conditions, then he will be killed directly. But if it's a woman, it can only be left to the captain. We have no right to say anything more. Sweetheart Queen looked at Chris and said with a smile, Chris, let her join us. Betty nodded lightly, took a breath and said, it's really not easy to come across a genius navigator. I suggest letting her join. Leiju stared at Chris, blinked her beautiful eyes, smiled tenderly, and followed suit. I think Nami's role is really great. Let her join us, Chris. Chris glanced at Nami, still so calm, and said lightly, let's go. After speaking, he stood up directly, put his hands in his trouser pockets, and walked towards the door. What does it mean? Don't let yourself join. Nami was stunned for a moment, completely confused. Nami, what are you still doing? Let's go. Karina patted her shoulders and said with a smile, Chris is just like this, he's taciturn. I don't know what he said, and I don't know what he means at all. In fact, he has already agreed, and you have officially joined now. Perona nodded and hurriedly said, yes, when you get to know Chris in the future, you will know the way he speaks. Bashes stood up, shrugged his shoulders and said, since the captain has agreed, then I have nothing to say. No, you can refuse. Poison Q looked at Bassos with a weird smile, this Nami dares to put forward conditions and must oppose her joining. Bosses, go and talk to the captain, don't let her join, he tilde tilde. Bosses glared at him and said viciously, you fucking want to kill Lao Su, if you really question the captain's decision, Lao Su will have a good end. Luo carried the ghost to cry, and said coldly, whether it will be killed, I don't know. However, it is certain to be beaten. No, the captain is not needed. Lafayette turned his cane and said with a slight smile, if he really dares to question the captain's decision, I will take the shot first. Nami followed everyone out, thanking her repeatedly, and was extremely happy. Thank you very much everyone. Seeing Chris and the others leave, the customers finally breathed a sigh of relief and began to talk loudly. It's so scary, who is that young man named Chris? It's so scary. Yeah, he is sitting here, I don't dare to speak, he is so strong. I'll find out in a few days. They have destroyed the overlord of the East China Sea and will definitely be wanted by the Navy. Just look at the reward order and you'll know. But I really envy him, there are so many beautiful women around, it's really eye-catching, ha ha ha. Besides the strong, there is definitely no shortage of beautiful women. When you become stronger, it will be like this. However, haha, this is impossible, don't dream. Likewise, the chefs discussed with each other. Patty laughed and said happily, I finally left, I'm really scared to death, ha ha ha. Carney nodded, shook his head, and sighed, I was so frightened that my hands trembled just now. This is the first time I have met such a terrifying person, alas tilde tilde. Boy, why don't you go and see your sister? Zap looked at Sanji and asked seriously. Sanji took a breath and was silent for a while, then slowly said, I have said everything that needs to be said, there is nothing to give, just leave. 065, Lord Chris, please save Lord Snake. On top of Chris. As always, Chris didn't stay on the deck, let's go directly to the training room, let's go to the training room and chat. Queen Sweetheart looked at Ruomiti and Nami, raised her eyebrows, smiled and said something. Mei Gang nodded lightly, behaving elegantly and generously, and said, Chris is really diligent, don't waste any time. Betty took a breath and said lightly, we all called him desperate. Saburo. Karina covered her mouth and laughed lightly. The voice was very nice and very intoxicating. You will know it later. When I first got on the boat, he was also shocked by his desperate efforts to the point where the girls laughed and followed Chris away. Padang jumped up and down, smiled and said to Bay Bibo, the boat is getting more and more lively, so happy, hee hee. Bibo took the fishing rod and called the device. Today I want to catch more than you. You are determined to lose. Ajin looked at the back of the girls leaving, looked indifferent, and said lightly, the captain is really lucky, surrounded by beautiful women, it is very enviable. You guys are too weak, you can't even fight if you want to fight, motherfucker. Bashes glanced at Ajin and was very dissatisfied with him. He walked directly to the side and confronted Ajin with a strange smile and said, these women are very beautiful, I think you can try it, maybe you can get it. You're always playing with fire, and one day you'll be slaughtered. Luo said coldly, walked to the side, and began to practice. Hawkins said in a low voice, no, he didn't show his death, and his life will not end here. Lafitte turned his cane, smiled slightly, and looked very polite, this guy will talk and dare not do it. Too much. However, if I am in a bad mood one day and accidentally kill you, I hope you don't blame me. Holding the two strangely shaped weapons, Agent smiled cruelly and said, don't worry, I will work hard to get rid of you as soon as possible. The position of deputy captain belongs to me. On the way back just now, he already knew that the existence of domineering was astonishing, and he wanted to learn such an ability, and he knew that Chris was practicing all the time. Chris, learn. Even if you practice until you die, you don't care. Hawkins looked at him like a dead man, and said calmly, although you have to practice hard and work hard. But your face is doomed that you cannot become the deputy captain. This is an unchangeable fact. On the other hand, Lafitte looks very good at Ajin. He stands with his cane in front of him, which encourages you to be a ruthless person. You will definitely practice hard in the future. I will never refuse. After all, the position of deputy captain can only be reserved for the strong. Inside the training room, Karina looked at Nami, blinked her beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, those people outside are all rude and boring. So when we have nothing to do, we prefer to stay here, chat and talk. Nami Chow had a puzzled look on her face, and asked curiously, no, I think everyone is fine, it's not as scary as you said. Betty leaned back on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and said lightly, you are wrong, it's because you don't know these guys. This acid boat pays attention to the supremacy of strength, and Chris intimidates everyone with absolute force. It is for this reason that they are obedient, but that doesn't mean anything. The sweetheart queen nodded, gathered her pale blonde hair, and then said, Nami, those people are all black-hearted, they are not courteous. Let's talk about Vice Captain Lafitte. Don't look at his gentle smile, very polite. This guy is very cruel at heart, not so gentleman on the surface. Perona floated in the air, her face wrinkled, and she looked disgusted. I hated that poisonous Q the most. This person laughed grimly, he was always booing on the boat. Najiayu twisted her delicate chin with her hand, looked at Baccarat, and said gently and generously, Speaking of which, if someone else is the captain, they will definitely not be able to restrain them. Bakura nodded lightly, folded her crimson hair and curled her eyebrows. Don't worry, with Chris here, they can only obey obediently. Just like the agent who just got on the boat, this guy looks like a very fierce person. Meaty is elegant and noble, smiled and said, from his indifferent eyes, you can know that this person must be very cruel. Karina looked at Nami and persuaded, anyway, don't get too close to those people, don't trust them too much. At this moment, a clear voice sounded. Blue blue blue. The girls looked for fame, and it turned out to be a phone bug on the boulder. Chris stopped practicing, walked over, and answered the phone. Lord Chris, please come and save my sister. The phone worm imitated the appearance of Marie Goth, and I saw her anxious and extremely frightened. At the same time, the phone worm continued to hear the rumbling sound, and the fighting was extremely intense and the voice was mixed. The elder sister has encountered a strong enemy, and her life is in danger. Before he could finish speaking, there was a loud bang on the opposite side, and the phone hung up instantly. Chris disappeared directly in place, and no one was there. Hearing the phone bug's urgent call for help, all the women were stunned. They know very well that the current situation must be very critical. Who was that person just now? Meaty looked at them and asked curiously. Queen Sweetheart shook her head, frowned and said, I don't know who she is, but the elder sister she speaks of must be Boya Hancock. Betty nodded and echoed, this phone bug can only contact her, so there is no doubt that it is Boya Hancock. 066, Hancock, stop resisting, you belong to me. First half of the Great Passage, Larnia. This is an inaccessible island. There are countless beasts on the island, and it is very dangerous. At this time, a war is breaking out here. How about contacting Chris? Sandasonia looked at Marigruder with an eager face, and asked quickly. Marigold nodded, looked at the battle in the distance, and said worriedly, I got in touch, but the phone was too vibrating just now and hung up accidentally. Broken. Lord Chris must have heard it, we will see if he can come here sooner. Hearing the rumbling sound in the distance, Karana frowned and her eyes were ugly. If it goes on like this, Lord Snakegi is afraid that couldn't hold on. Margaret Ning held a bow and arrow, and said with great loyalty, Lord Yeodasonia, Lord Marigold, let's get up and fight with him. Tilda. Yes, fight with him, and swear to protect Lord Sheji. The other warriors on the Nine Snake Island shared the same hatred, with a resolute look on their faces. Sandasonia glared at them and scolded, is it useful for us to go up? Honey, let us not go up, don't you know her good intentions? Marigold stomped his feet and said bitterly, if we can escape from the sea, we will retreat immediately and we'll be done. If we really get on the ship, he uses that shocking ability, and we all have to die at sea. Karina was so anxious that she walked back and forth and quickly said, what should we do, what should we do? At this time, there was a sound of laughter from the front. Boya, Hancock, you are not my opponent, surrender honestly. Gaimanio wears green clothes, a green mask, a long tongue, and looks like a lizard. You should have seen my abilities. I take the initiative to be the strongest in this world, and you are the number one in the world. Beauty, you are meant to be mine, hiss. When I saw your beautiful figure in the newspaper, I was really fascinated by you. Kamini opened his arms and said arrogantly, be my woman, I can give you everything, Boya Hancock. Captive arrow. Hancock ignored his words, a huge pink heart changed in front of him, and quickly pulled back to Shu Shulin. A large number of pink arrows, like lightning, attacked the man on the opposite side. It's useless, in front of me copying the fruit, everything is in vain. As soon as Carmenio finished speaking, a huge pink heart appeared in front of him, pulled back, and let go. Commenting on the broken bang, the arrows on both sides collided continuously in the air vibrated faintly, and the explosion did not come from Hancock's attack, and it was directly broken by Carmenio. As long as it is an ability person, there is no ability that I can't copy. Gaimanio is not in a hurry to attack. He put his hands in his trouser pockets and said something arrogant. Although he can't perfectly use the ability of the person's attack, this does not change the fact. The strongest devil fruit in the world is the replica fruit. Whitebeard's shocking fruit, known as the strongest superhuman type. In my opinion, it is a joke. What kind of illusion, and what kind of natural type? In front of me copying the fruit, all are garbage. Listen to Gamenio to see looking at Hancock's eyes. It was as if the hungry wolf saw the rabbit, and said with a smile, "Beauty, it's really beautiful. Boya Hancock, become my woman, I will definitely love you very much. Hiss is so beautiful, there are such American women in this world. You belong to me, but only to me. Ha ha ha. Like her so much." The woman in front of her has long black and beautiful hair, and her body is so perfect that her face is flawless, just like an angel. So beautiful. Damn man. Hancock gritted his silver teeth, and his face was full of anger. His tone was so cold that he wanted to be a concubine. What kind of a piece of shit are you? Igia will definitely kill you. Caminio laughed out loud, and said arrogantly, "You haven't seen it yet. If Boya hadn't kept my hand, you'd be lying on the ground now, and you could still stand talking to Lao Su. If a man has died hundreds of times, believe it or not." Carmenio looked up and down at Hancock and said, "You are so beautiful, I can't bear to do it. I don't want to hurt you and ask for flowers. 0. If a woman of such peerless elegance is hurt in the slightest, I won't allow it. Boya Hancock, follow me. You swear that you will be good to you, and you will listen to you in the future. A woman like you, worth everything." Hancock wrinkled his beautiful willow eyebrows, and kept thinking about countermeasures in his mind, how to defeat him. Although she kept saying that she was going to kill Carmenio, Hancock was very clean, and that was just talk and he couldn't do it at all. This lizard man is really too strong. He is not his opponent at all and regrets it. At this moment, Hancock feels extremely ashamed. He vowed to leave Nine Snake Island and threatened to shake the sea and let everyone know his strength. But before entering the new world, he has already met an unmatched opponent, which really hurt Hancock very much. Her heart, which has always been high and unwilling to give in, finally fell to the ground. She admitted that she was wrong, and she knew that she was wrong before. How, do you want to understand? Carmenio seriously admired Hancock's peerless style, and said with a big laugh, "It's okay, think about it slowly, I have time, oh Tilda. Do you know Boya Hancock? I used to be on Whitebeard's crew. I've been to so many places with him. I've seen so many women. What kind of beauties I haven't seen. I've seen them all after passing a beautiful woman like you. This is the first time that I have seen it. It is really Carmenio who has never met before." Looking carefully at the jade person in front of Ruo, with a wolf-like look in his eyes, and commenting on it. The hair is so smooth, the eyes are so charming, and the skin is so white and beautiful. I don't know what to say. It's so perfect. I feel like you don't have any flaws at all. God, how can there be such a flawless woman in the world? I love you, damn you, Boya. Hancock. 067. Copy the fruit, copy the shocking ability of Whitebeard. Hearing Carmenio's arrogant words, the warriors of Nine Snakes Island were indignant. "Let's go up and help. Even if we fight to the death, we will not hesitate." Yes, the warriors of Yamabaihei, Lord Sandasonia, who has never feared death, Lord Marigold, let's attack and defend Lord Snake to the death. When I decide to go to sea with Lord Snake, I will life and death are out of the question. No matter what, you must protect Lord Snake G. Let's fight, I beg you two adults, let's help Lord Snake G. Marie Gorod fell silent, with a tangled look on his face and the pros and cons. Liang Dasonia was rude, and reprimanded them directly, shouting angrily, "Stop talking about these stupid things, did you hear me? You are all children of Amazon Lily, how can we watch you die? We went to sea together, and we must go back together. Everyone must be safe and sound. We must not easily do." Karana frowning and showing her brows. She said very worriedly, "But this is not the way to go. When will Lord Chris come? We don't know. 11 inches. Even if you delay time here, there must be a limit. This bastard can't wait too long. Sure enough, at this time, Carmenio in the field has finished appreciating Hancock and analyzed it very thoroughly. How about it? Didn't make a decision. Carmenio shrugged his shoulders and said with a big laugh, Boya Hancock, in this world, strength is supreme and my strength is so strong. What else do you have to think about? Just be my woman. I like you very much and dote on you very much, but my patience has a bottom line. Gamenio looked at Hancock and laughed, his eyes were like a hungry wolf. If you don't agree, I can only force it. At that time, it will make you hurt a little bit, there is no way to do it, and I don't want it. Hancock's beautiful eyebrows have been locked all the time, and she has never let go. She has thought of a lot of ways, but in the end, she has denied it, and gave up all of this bastard in front of her. Marie Gold, Liang Dasonia, take the people with you, and leave here immediately. Hancock turned his head to look in the direction of the 9 Snake Island warriors, his pretty face was full of seriousness, and he gave the order to the girls, and immediately knew what Hancock was thinking, this was to fight to the end. Going to fight to the death. No, elder sister, we will fight with you, and we will die together. Mary Gordon is in a hurry. Looking at Hancock, he said with a very firm tone. Dawsonia's eyes were fixed on the man, and he said viciously. Even if we die, we will never leave. Yes, Lord Snake, please let us fight with you. Warriors of 9 Snake Island. All shouted, and died generously, no one was afraid. Cook was about to speak again, when Carmenio spoke first. One by one, are you courting death? Carmenio looked at them coldly, and said with disdain, just you people, I can get it done in minutes, what kind of rubbish? Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind, and he thought of a good way. Gamenio looked at this beautiful beauty, he laughed, and threatened to say Boya, Hancock, I already have a way to make you surrender. What you said just now revealed your weakness. As long as I firmly grasp your citizens, do you still dare not agree? Carmenio looked at Hancock, smiled cruelly, and said, ask you again, would you like to be mine? If your answer makes Lao Su unsatisfied, Lao Su will kill them immediately and, one by one, kill. Hearing this, Hancock was extremely furious, and his footsteps were like an arrow from the string, rushing towards the damned guy in the Kamini circle, even daring to threaten his concubine body, go to death. Fragrant feet. The right leg wearing the high-heeled shoes swept over to Gamenio's head with great momentum, and the air trembled. Too much, in front of me, your speed is not enough to see that Gamenio has found a good way. He does not fight with Hancock, he jumps directly to avoid the attack and glances at Hancock coldly, with an extremely fierce smile. He said, okay, very good, I've already sharpened your bottom line, and since that's the case, I'll give you a small punishment first, so that you know the consequences of doing so. He bulged his head muscles, put it in front of him, and made a move of shaking his hands and kidneys. A pale white circle of light appeared quietly, wrapping his student head in the sun, shining brightly, and seeing it with a mysterious power. When Carmenio made this move, Hancock's pupils shrank, he turned his head quickly, and shouted to the people that she was high above the surface and didn't look down on the people, but in fact, these were all hers. It's not like that at all. At this moment, she is full of anxiety, and she is very worried that if she hides quickly, she turns around and starts to run away. Late ha ha ha. Let you see, my most powerful force, shake it. Carmenio let out a loud roar, watching if the fleeing citizens slammed into the air with a punch. And rumbling outwards. The ground cracked quickly, the air vibrated strongly, all the trees, flowers and grass fell down, the castration was fierce, and it quickly spread to the people. Ah ah. The screams rang out, and everyone fell to the ground. No one was spared, but these citizens, except for the wolves, did not suffer any harm. Boya Hancock, see my strength. Looking at Hancock, Carmenio smiled grimly and said, this is just the first warning, if you don't agree, then I'm sorry. Next, Lao Su will not keep his hands anymore, and will definitely kill them one by one. 068. Damn, it turned out to be the ability of the General Kizaru. All right, how are you all doing? Hancock dodged, moved quickly, and came to the people of Nine Snake Island. At this time, the ground was completely destroyed, countless cracks appeared, trees collapsed, flowers and plants were broken, and the eyes were full of scars. Sandasonia and Marigold snorted when they saw Hancock coming. We're all right, Snake Princess, Human Tilda. The citizens stood up one by one, their faces disheveled, looking very embarrassed. Kurana looked at Hancock with a serious dignified expression, and said in a dignified manner, Lord Snake, run away. Let's hold him back and buy you enough time. I beg you to get out of here, no matter what, you must escape. Marigold nodded and said something quickly. Sister, please go quickly and leave here safely. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and said loudly, the warriors of Yama, Lily, I haven't finished speaking, but Hancock interrupted me directly. Enough. Han Shek surrounded his people with an indifferent expression, and said very strongly, Aigia, as the Queen of Amazon's Lily, orders you all to evacuate here now. Who dares to disobey the order of the Aigia, and will never forgive. Carmenio took a slow step, sneered, and said something very arrogant. Hey. Boya Hancock, are you thinking too well? These hostages are my best way to make you surrender. How could Lao Su let them go? With his long tongue, Carmenio made a snarling sound, and said with a big laugh, besides, do you think they can escape at their speed? Finally, let me ask you Luck, would you like to be my woman? If I am not satisfied with the answer this time, then I will kill it and look left and right, and finally point to Margaret and say with a cruel smile, she. Margaret took the bow and arrow, and immediately aimed at Carmenio, not afraid of death at all, and loudly said a damn bastard, go to hell. The arrow turned black in an instant, and the arming was completed. Don't you listen to Aigia's words one by one. Hancock looked at Margaret, his eyes became cold, and Margaret, who was so powerful, was taken aback, and quickly put away his bow and arrow, bowed to Hancock, and said very humbly, Lord Snake, what you say is what, I will leave immediately. Sister, let's drive high and leave immediately. Sandasonia and Marigold, seeing Hancock's appearance, did not dare to hesitate any longer, and quickly agreed. It's very good. Carmenio opened his arms, laughed, and said arrogantly, it seems that you don't take Lao Su seriously, Boya Hancock. My patience with you ends here. Next, I won't ask you again, I will. Carmenio looked at Hancock, smiled and said, I'll catch one and kill one, until you nod and agree, if you don't agree, then I'll kill them all. Now, from her. After the exchange, he was not in a hurry at all. He took a sullen step and walked towards Margaret. He wanted to make Hancock feel scared and make her surrender to him from the bottom of his heart. This is psychological warfare. Hancock roared angrily, and people rushed towards Carmenio no matter what. To stop him, to buy enough time for the people. Marie Gorst gritted her teeth, almost the word came out of her teeth. All the battlefields of the Nine Snake Island, scattered, fleeing to various places to stop me, are you joking? The face of Hancock's kick, Carmenio sneered and said, I said just now, your speed is too slow. With a swoosh, the man dodged to the right and ducked directly. Escape, do you think you can escape? Carmenio showed a cruel smile and said in a cold tone, even if you run away, can you still avoid Lao Su's attack? The right hand was slowly raised, and the fingertips were facing the direction of Margaret. A pale golden light spot appeared quietly. Immediately after, the light spot continued to expand, turning into a circle of light, emitting a strong light, illuminating the surrounding space. Dyed gold. Ask for flowers. Boya Hancock, do you think she can run faster than the speed of light? Carmenio just doesn't attack. Looking at Hancock, he grinned and got this golden light. Hancock couldn't help but wrinkle. He raised his eyebrows and said bitterly, damn, it turned out to be the ability of General Polsolino. Aigia warns you that if you dare to attack the people of Aigia, your concubine will definitely kill you. She has no other choice now. This Carmenio is really too strong and too strong. He has all kinds of powerful fruit abilities. He is not his opponent at all. The gap in strength is too great. Even if he wants to stop him from attacking, Hancock knows her very clearly there's no way to stop this bastard. Apart from verbal threats, she has nothing to do. Boya Hancock, you are so lost, it breaks my heart. Carmenio shook his head and said with emotion, I am the strongest man in the world, you are the most beautiful woman, why did you reject me? You will kill a lot of people by doing this. Although I don't want to start with women, I have no other choice. Carmenio looked at Hancock and said with a ruthless smile, Boya Hancock, because of your refusal, someone is about to be killed by you. Span. Take a good look at it, and repent in your heart, ha ha ha. As soon as he said that, he turned his head and looked forward, and saw that Margaret had run far away, and he was about to launch an attack. Hancock stared blankly in the direction of Margaret, and there was a lot of anxiety on his eyes. Look, shouted. Carmenio's eyes turned cold, and the light from his fingertips bloomed brightly. At this moment, a faint voice rang out in the forest. 069, Chris, give me death, big fire. Carmenio was startled, the light from his fingertips slowly faded, and then went out in a blink of an eye. The same, when he heard the sudden sound, everyone who was running froze for a moment and all stopped, heading towards the battlefield. Look! I saw a young man in black clothes and black trousers, with his hands in the pockets of his trousers, standing quietly. Shinsei was calm and indifferent, and his body faintly exuded the feeling of a strong man, very mysterious. Carmenio looked at the young man in front of him, frowned, and asked the man in black with a vigilant look. His first impression was that he was very powerful, and he suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Such a false accusation is really terrifying. Hancock wore this incomparably handsome man, with a beautiful and flawless appearance, with a sweet and charming smile. How did you know the concubine was here? Did you come here specifically to look at the concubine? The concubine is very open. Hancock's jade hand is sticking to the white eyelid. Such a young man, Carmenio's lungs will explode with Yan's appearance as such a young daughter. Staring at Chris with a grim look, he smiled cruelly and said, Boya Hancock is mine, and everything she belongs to me belongs to Lao Su. You bloody bastard, I will torture you so hard that your life is not as good as death. Quickly turn your head, look at Hancock, his eyes are burning with fire, and he said in a cold tone, You bitch, Yuan Ran dares to treat others. Men talk like that. When Lao Su kills him, I must punish you with life, you damn bitch. The soldiers of Nine Snake Island outside the stadium, looking at the man in black, breathed a sigh of relief. Marie Grod wiped the sweat from his forehead and said with a smile, Come on, Lord Chris is finally here. Let's go. Saved. Sandersonia nodded again and again, and said with great joy, My elder sister said, he is the goddamn Carmenio with the strength of a general. Holding it tightly, with an excited look on her pretty face, she said quickly, Even if he's not the bastard's opponent, it doesn't matter if he is there, plus Lord Snake, this Carmenio will definitely lose. Reese glanced at Hancock and said calmly as always, You think too much, there is no such thing as the people below you call me and ask me for help. The situation is so simple. Hearing this, Hancock quickly turned around. Head, looking at Marigold and Sandersonia, he said something very dissatisfied. Who told you to call Chris? You too. Forget it, if this happens again next time, Igia will never forgive Marigold and Sandersonia lightly, nodded again and again, and said with a careful smile, Yes, yes, Mrs. Sister followed. Hancock turned around. Looking at Chris, on the beautiful and delicate eyelids, there is a happy and sweet smile, and the voice is sweet. Chris, although you didn't come here specifically to see your body, you rushed over as soon as you heard that you were in danger. So happy, my concubine is really happy. Degree. The happiest woman in the world. Angry. Seeing Hancock appearing like this again, he didn't take his own words seriously at all. The anger in Carmenio's heart was enough to burn the whole world. Boya Hancock, you bloody bitch. After I kill him, I will concoct you, bitch, damn it. Turned his head quickly, stared at Chris viciously, and said coldly, I don't know who you are, but these are more important, because you will be killed immediately. As soon as the voice fell, the right hand instantly turned red, the magma rolled, the heat wave was far away, and the thick black seemed to even ignite the air. You can see how high the temperature is. Chris, he is a fruit copier, and he can copy the skills of the ability person. You must be careful. Hancock looked at Chris, and quickly reminded her that she knew that Chris was very strong, but she was still a little worried. After all, this Carmenio is really too strong, and his ability is very strange. Chris did not answer Hancock. His hands were still in his trouser pockets, his eyes were calm and he looked at Carmenio with a very indifferent expression, and he did nothing. Seeing Chris like this, Carmenio sneered and shouted, give me death. Big fire. A huge magma fist appeared in the air, exuding a terrifying heat wave, and the space distorted with black smoke billowing, not only rising, but Joey's temperature rose rapidly, as if entering a world of fire with a bang. The giant fist of magma exploded and turned into countless volcanic bombs, all aimed at thick black smoke, carrying terrifyingly high temperatures, densely packed, 257 like raindrops. Lightning strikes towards Chris. Seeing such a shocking scene, the soldiers of Nine Snake Island panicked and screamed. Too strong, this Carmenio is really too strong. Lord Chris, will he be his opponent? With a worried look on his face, Marie Groud quickly said that Sandersonia had cold sweat on her forehead and was so frightened that she said, it should be fine, or we'll be screwed. Karana shook her head and said with a wry smile, this bastard has been playing with us just now, and he didn't use his full strength at all. Lord Chris, you must win Ming, please. Similarly, Hancock was also shocked. Looking at Chris' figure, a look of panic appeared on the pretty face, and she shouted, Chris, you must be careful about the terrifying volcanic bomb that came from the attack. Chris's eyes drifted. With a bang, he disappeared in place, and came to Carmenio in an instant. Before he could react, he slammed a punch. 070, Vientiane. Chris, what is this ability? The shrill screams sounded, and Carmenio was directly looked at. Rumbling, _ Those terrifying volcanic bombs smashed to the ground, thick smoke billowed, the surface was completely destroyed, and instantly turned into a sea of magma. The heat wave was scorching hot, and the air bubbles continued to come out from the inside, making a popping sound. The surrounding land was roasted by the high temperature and turned black, directly scorching the trees, flowers and rocks. As long as it is near the volcanic bomb, there is nothing that can be preserved, and it is all destroyed by the attack power of the natural rock berry, which is evident. At this time, the people around didn't care at all. The destructive power brought by the big fire breathed them all to look at Chris. In addition to shock, everyone was shocked. It's too terrifying to kill this incomparably powerful man with a simple one. This is Mr. Chris. No wonder Mrs. Sister said that he has the strength of a general. It is too powerful. Marigold looked at Chris with a shocked look on his face, and couldn't help but feel awe in his heart. I admire the power of Chris very much. Sandersonia nodded. No panic was seen on her face. She said with a big smile, as expected of the man my sister liked, I recognize this brother-in-law. I didn't believe it when I heard about your strength, Lord Ticris. Karana shook her head, with an expression of incomparable emotion on her pretty face, and murmured, now, I really understand it. Strong, Lord Chris is really too strong, and definitely has the strength to rival the generals. Margaret raised her arms and cheered loudly, long live Lord Chris, long live Lord Chris. The rest of the Nine Snake Island citizens hurriedly followed with a loud voice, which was very lively, full of flowers and applause. At this moment, all the soldiers of Amazon, Lily had their admiration for Chris. Chris, you are amazing, really amazing. Hancock took elegant and noble steps, sticking to the extreme eyelid, showing a look of admiration. Just like this, there was deep affection in his beautiful eyes, his tone was very gentle, and he praised, you know that you are the strongest. Reese, concubine proud of you. Not far away, Marigold and Chanda Sonia looked at each other, nodded and walked away. Everyone left here quietly, looking at the soldiers. Marigold reminded in a low voice that Karana nodded and said with a slight smile, "It's really not appropriate to stay here. I'd better leave the time to the two of you for a walk." The soldiers also knew that it was inappropriate to stay here, so they acted quickly and quickly retreated to the periphery. In the depths of the island, there were only 3 people left. 2 people stood, one person was like a dead dog. Bang there. Chris ignored Hancock's reed beauty, lit a cigarette, and smoked silently watching his sweetheart there puffing clouds. Hancock beauty p brilliant Chris, my concubine suddenly discovered that you look so handsome when you smoke. Han Kukayu put his hands behind his back, leaned forward slightly, with a perfect figure, showing his unquestionably alluring face, with a captivating smile, and said sweetly in a sweet voice, "Chris, if you are a concubine today, you should feel good about it. If it doesn't show up, the concubine is afraid to explain it here." Looking at Chris's eyes, with determination, he said in a firm tone, "Aigia is the queen of Yama to meet Baihei. She only has to die in battle, and she will definitely not give in. However, you appeared, like a hero, appeared in front of the concubine, and protected the concubine." "Oh, what did the concubine say?" The concubine didn't know what to say, and Cook stuck his hands on the dangerous cheeks, shook his head gently, extremely shy. She looked so cute. Such a peerless beauty, really unique in the world. I'll never find someone so beautiful. Chris still ignored Hancock, spit out the smoke from his mouth, and pointed to the 1 dozens of meters away to the right. "Chris." Hancock finally came back to his senses, found Chris's strangeness, and quickly followed. But there was a fruit tree with some apple-shaped fruits growing on it. There was nothing unusual about it. She didn't understand why Chris was staring there. In an instant, a white round hole appeared in the palm of the hand, like a ping-pong ball. A fruit tens of meters away separated from the tree and flew towards Chris. Hancock was shocked. Such a long distance, but Chris, it is incredible that one ran can attract that fruit. Hancock looked at the man beside him, his beautiful eyes were shining, and he asked curiously, "Chris, what is this ability? Didn't you eat the fruit of rejection? Logically speaking, you should only be able to reject it outwards. How it has become attractive now, it really makes Hao Shen very puzzled." At this time, the fruit was already caught by Chris, took a breath, and said calmly to reject the fruit. "I developed it into 2 situations. One is forward repulsion and the other is reverse. Positive repulsion, when using the fruit ability, it will repel outward." Chris spit out the smoke in his mouth, and said lightly, "The reverse repulsion is just the opposite. When using the ability, the foot attracts inward." Shocked. Although Chris's tone was flat, without any turbulence, Hancock was really shocked. How terrifying is the talent of the man in front of him that he was able to develop the fruit of rejection to such a degree. 0.9 Hancock feels his head. "Straight is not enough, Chris. You are indeed the most powerful man in the world." Hancock is right in front of this handsome man, who is beautiful except for one minister. With a smile, he said, "My concubine feels that no matter what it is, when it comes to your hands, it will be easily solved. There is no difficulty in the slightest. The feeling you give to your concubine is like this. You are a powerful and mysterious man, tilde. 071. Chris, spit it out, you can't eat devil fruits anymore." Ignoring Hancock's compliment, Chris slowly squatted down and placed the fruit on Gamenio's heart. At this time, Chris's eyes were as calm as always, without any excitement. "Chris, you are again. What to do?" Hancock also squatted down, looking at Chris's strange behavior. She couldn't help but ask, "Not to mention, the world's #1 beauty, this name is really not the Hancock behind Guy's hoof. The body is more and more conspicuous, and the hair is fluttering. This is the key to fascinating people. Since I ate the fruit of rejection, I have been researching how to repel the devil fruit eaten by the able-bodied." Chris flicked the cigarette butt off and said calmly, "What I'm going to do now is this. After speaking, the 5 fingers of his right hand spread out, and a faint white light appeared quietly, not converging in shock. Hancock shocked again. She knew that Chris was very powerful and mysterious. But I can't imagine that he has such a strange ability. Is this really something that people can do? Is this man in front of him really omnipotent? That's all. The concubine doesn't know what to say anymore. Hancock looked at Chris with admiration in his beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, "You are too powerful, and the concubine will not be shocked in the future. Anyway, on you, no matter what happens, it is reasonable." Chris, who will keep this in mind, still ignores her. The white light in his right hand is very dazzling, and the 3 of them are enveloped in it. The right hand is directly attached to Gamenio's body, and the repulsive force is activated. Gamenio was created with the bag, lying there like a dead dog. The younger generation has never changed, it has really changed. Han Shek had been staring at the fruit, and when Maimyu was not a minister, she suddenly discovered that the color of the fruit was constantly changing. Originally a whole-body blue fruit, the bottom gradually turned black, and it moved up quickly. Soon, the whole fruit turned pitch black, with delirium entwined on it. It looked so mysterious and unusual. It was a success. Hancock looked at Chris, his beautiful eyes burst into a dazzling light, his pretty face was full of admiration, and he said something with joy. "Chris, you surprised your concubine too much. You are really too good. You are too painful, you know." Proud, concubine is really proud. Chris took his right hand away, the white light gradually disappeared, and a rare faint smile appeared, saying, "It really succeeded." Holding the fruit in his hand, he slowly stood up. Bang! The sound of the sound came, and Carmenio was kicked by Chris, and drifting in the direction of the magma might be a pain. When Carmenio woke up, he suddenly found that he was weak and could not bear the pain. Damn, what's going on? Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he found the magma below, and he was shocked, and quickly slammed his right hand, wanting to use the magma to assimilate. What my abilities? When he found that he couldn't use the power of the fruit of evil, Carmenio was completely panicked. He knew that he was dead. With a thud, the man fell into the magma. After a scream, the whole person was drowned by the lava, and he couldn't die any longer. Hancock hummed and said with a smile, "Damn stinky man, dare to threaten Igia, this is your end." Then, he turned his head to look at Chris, and said with a smile, "Chris, thank you for killing him for your concubine." Chris didn't answer, lowered his head slightly, silently looked at the evil fruit in his hand, and finally made the final decision. "Raise your hand and take a bite." "Chris, what are you doing?" Hancock was startled, with a very panicked look on his pretty face, and said eagerly, "It's about to spit out. Those who are incapable eat 2 evil fruits, they will." Chris waved his hand, indicating that Hancock should not be so nervous. Then, he slowly closed his eyes and saw that a white light appeared on his body, covering his whole body. Seeing Chris like this, Hancock knew it very well. The fact that Chris had a way to eat 2 evil fruits shocked her again. "Chris, why are you so powerful? I really admire you so much." Hancock silently looked at Chris' figure and took a small breath, for fear of disturbing the deep love in his sweetheart's beautiful eyes. This man is so handsome, so stable and mature, and his strength is so terrifying. Hancock is really completely intoxicated with his love for Chris, reaching the extreme. At this moment, Chris let out a breath, the white light on his body gradually dissipated, and he slowly opened his eyes. It was successful. "Chris, you really are the best. I am so happy to see Chris like this." Han Li Chenjiao, how can Cook not understand? K's own sweetheart has the ability to copy the fruit. "Chris, show me now." The concubine is curious. Hancock's beautiful eyes are shining, and her face is full of anticipation. The more powerful her lover is, the happier she will be. As long as it's what happened to Chris, Hancock wants to know, and he's willing to take the time to understand that she wants to study this man clearly and clearly. Never let go of any little detail. 1. 072. Repel the weakness of the copy fruit. Chris nodded and didn't say much. He slowly picked up his right hand and pointed his fingertips in the direction of the magma. Seeing Chris make this move, Hancock's beauty lit up, and his pretty face showed a surprised look, very happy. Said. General Posolino's abilities. Light golden light spots appeared quietly, confirming what she said. Immediately after, the light spots quickly became larger, forming a golden circle, dyeing the two of them into light gold. A strong beam of light cut through the void, and the terrifying explosion sounded into the magma pool. The volume was very high. It was rumored that the soldiers of Nine Snake Island in foreign countries on the entire island heard this explosion, and they all heard the explosion. Face, don't know what happened. What's the matter, is that bastard not dead yet? Karana frowned, and her pretty eyes showed an extremely confused look. Sandasonia shook her head and said in denial, Master Chris is so strong. How could it not kill him? Don't think about it, it'll be alright. Marie Gorzond looked at the soldiers and reminded aloud. Everyone went over, there was nothing to do, and you must not disturb the daughters of Sister Nine Snake Island, nodded quickly and responded, yes, Lord Marie Grod. Looking at the place hit by the beam, Hancock showed a shocked expression on his eyelids, and murmured that he is strong, really strong. It is indeed the fruit of the evil mansion owned by the general. The attack power is indeed extraordinary. The original magma pool has disappeared, leaving a huge deep pit. The scene of Joe Guo is scorched black, like purgatory. Chris rarely wrinkled his hair, and his resolute face needed a thoughtful look. Noticing the abnormality of his sweetheart, Hancock folded his jet black hair, smiled and asked, what's wrong with Chris? Although this fruit can replicate other people's abilities, Well can't fully utilize Chris's hands in his trouser pockets, and calmly said, it can only replicate 90% of the attack power of the original abilities, this is the highest limit. In addition, if you want to copy the ability of others, you must have seen the person with the ability. I have used the power of the evil fruit just now. I was thinking about using the fruit of rejection in this way to exclude all the weaknesses of the fruit of copying. Chris's eyes show resolutely. Shen Sheng said, if I do this step, then this evil fruit will be the strongest existence in the world. At that time, I can copy anyone's ability, and I can play it perfectly. If I want to pull the Tianlong people off the altar, I will have a better chance of winning. Listening to the words of I Lang's vows, Hancock's heart-shaped helmet is put on, and his eyes are beautiful. Brilliant splendor, a sweet smile can't help but bloom on the pretty eyelids. This novel was first published by Dragon. Fei Lu's novel Internal Group 1,142,529,731. More wonderful Fei Lu novels are in the hands of the group owner. Welcome to the group. Yes, Chris, you will definitely succeed. I believe that nothing in this world can stop you. You are so excellent, and the wealth is so shocking, there is no reason for you to fail. Chris looked at Hancock and said lightly, leave that aside, what are your plans next? Speaking of this, Hancock fell silent. He didn't speak back to Chris for the first time. He still put his hands in his trouser pockets and quietly turned to her right. I don't know how long it took. Hancock looked right at him. His eyes were low, and his beautiful face was full of guilt. To the extreme. Just like what you said, the concubine has been staying in the windless belt, without encountering any danger, and will only sit in the well and watch the sky sink into it. Wrong, concubine, wrong, really wrong. Having said that, he raised his head slightly, and said with great shame, Chris, don't worry, my concubine will never be like this again in the future. The concubine will work hard to cultivate and become stronger, and will no longer be as arrogant as before. And Cook's apology from the lungs and chest once again changed Chris's impression of her. Originally, Hancock became stronger when he went to sea, which made Chris have a good impression of her. Now, I feel more and more that Hancock is a man. Really very good, Chris said with a slight smile. To tell the truth, your potential is very huge, and your qualifications are first class. In the past, you wasted time and wasted years, which made you stagnant and did not become a top powerhouse, but all these have passed. If you can say these words today, it means that you already have the heart of a powerhouse. With admiration in his eyes, Chris encouraged, in a few years, the top group of powerhouses will definitely have your name. Speaking of which, since Chris came to this world, it was the first time to cheer up people like this. How rare. It can be seen that Hancock's change has made Chris so relieved. How can the concubine be as good as you said? Seeing the admiration in Chris's eyes, Hancock instantly became shy, covered his cheeks with his jade hands, and murmured in a low voice. Murmured a word. Your concubine can't be too weak, or you can follow you very much, following in your footsteps. Chris nodded and said with a smile, next, you will enter the new world, where the powerhouse's territory is full of crises. If you encounter danger again, don't hold on, remember to call me. Hancock sighed, nodded heavily, raised his eyebrows, smiled sweetly and said, yes, you are the biggest backer of the concubine. In the future, whenever there is something that cannot be solved, I will definitely contact you. I congratulate Chris without any more nonsense, and just said 2.1, okay, you continue to sail, after I have finished speaking, you must activate your ability and leave. Here. At this time, Hancock hurriedly said, Chris, can my concubine call you often in the future? Of course I can. As soon as the voice fell, Chris disappeared in an instant, and no one was seen. Hearing Chris's answer, Hancock's two little hands were tightly clasped, his beautiful eyes were shining, and Chris, who was at risk of happiness, would call you every day from now on, he said something to himself. Then took elegant steps, and walked lightly to the foreign country of the island. 073. Navy Headquarters, start discussing Chris. East China Sea, Navy Division 16. Knock knock knock. Colonel, there is an urgent matter to report to you. Outside the wooden door. The teenage young man knocked on the door softly, and said in a respectful tone inside the room, there was a sharp voice, especially unpleasant, very harsh, screeching. The young man opened the door, walked in slowly, and saw the office inside. There is a middle-aged man leaning on a chair with his feet on the desk, drinking coffee. He is a colonel of the 16th Division of the East China Sea Navy, Colonel Mouse. I received a call just now. The thief group entered our East China Sea area. The young people stood quietly and respectfully said, according to the following disloyalty, the leader of the largest sea group in the East China Sea, click. He has been killed by the other party, and the entire pirate group has been scattered, fleeing and dying. Stood up immediately, and said in shock, what did you just say? The Crick Sea Tibetan Regiment has been wiped out. How is this possible? He has thousands of people and dozens of ships under his command. Who can kill him? Did the following people report it indiscriminately? The young man lowered his head, did not dare to hesitate, and quickly explained the colonel that the situation had been investigated, and it was indeed true. At Bharati, a restaurant on the sea, the two groups met and a fight broke out. The Crick pirates did not have any power to fight at all, so the young man who was killed by the group handed a stack of papers to him, and said in a humble tone, Lord Colonel, this is the situation of the other pirate group, please let me know. Look over. Without the slightest hesitation, Colonel Mouse opened the paper and read the lead. Chris, wearing black clothes and black trousers. Colonel Mouse had 10 lines in one eye, and the more he looked, the more surprised he became. The color of his eyelids did not change. Whether it was the Vice Captain Lafitte or the other lay captains, all of them were extremely powerful and could be called evil. From the data, Crick waited. Just like a sheep, it was slaughtered without any resistance at all. Damn it. Colonel Mouse slammed the information on the table, and a mouse eyelid showed an angry expression, and his voice was extremely harsh and cursed. Where did these damn pirates come from, and why did they come to the East China Sea? Damn guy, why don't you go to other places, but choose to come to the East China Sea? These bastards can't do it, these people are too dangerous, they must go there. Colonel Mouse had a terrified look on his face, and said to himself, these people are wicked desperados and must be reported to the headquarters for them to deal with. That's right, it's settled. Okay, you go out, the Lord will handle this matter. The young man agreed, and quickly turned around and walked towards the door. Unbeatable said more about this mouse colonel. As his name suggests, he is very humble, unscrupulous, greedy for life and fear of death. The soldiers in the branch are very afraid of him and respect him. Incomparable, dare not say a word, Marine Headquarters, Malin Fando. At this time, there were many generals sitting in the conference room. Suddenly, Branu took a plate of documents and walked over to Lord Warring States quickly. There was news just now, please take a look. Respectfully handed the information to the Warring States, then quietly stood aside. Posada Salino leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and said strangely, "Is there any surprising news, but don't scare the old man." Branu looked at Kizaru and said humbly, "The 16th Division of the East China Sea has just received news that a group of powerful sea stables has entered the East China Sea. And with such ease, they eradicated the largest pirate group in the East China Sea in one fell swoop." Karp turned his head quickly, looked at Branu and said, "Quick, tell me the situation in detail. This old man, I am very interested in the weakest sea area of the East China Sea. Finally there is some movement, ha ha ha." Huo Shaoshan looked at Karp with a very gentle smile, and said, "Donghai is your hometown, no wonder you are so attentive." The mouse nodded and said with a smile, "The East China Sea is indeed too calm, there are basically no riots, it is a stable sea area of the four seas." At this time, Warring States had finished reading the information, looked at Branu, and said solemnly, "Next, you will report the situation." Branu looked at the generals present and introduced them in detail. This pirate group was named Chris Pirates, and the captain called Chris. In the most famous hull in the East China Sea, Bharati, a battle broke out between the two sides. Captain Chris didn't make a move. The following squad captains, in 3 minutes, wiped out the other party. After reporting the news, we conducted an analysis and found that the ships used by this group of pirates were Beihai Naxia of the Overlord White Ghost Sea Booty Group. According to our speculation, the White Ghost pirates have probably been wiped out, and even the ship has been taken away. Branu has a clear mind, remembered all these contents, and quickly explained the situation clearly, so that everyone here knows the specific situation. After Branu finished speaking, Warring States knocked on the desk and said solemnly, "Let's talk about the situation. This group of people is worth our discussion. It's really good." Karp raised his head and laughed loudly, and said loudly, "There is such an interesting kid in the East China Sea, I really want to visit my hometown now, ha ha ha." "Asshole Garp, don't yell at Ying in the conference room." Warring States glared at him fiercely, with an angry look on his face, and he was very dissatisfied and reprimanded. 074. Send a lieutenant general to capture the Chris pirates. Ouch. Porosalino cocked his mouth and said yin and yang strangely, "Young people today are really scary tilde." Sakaski was dignified, with a very serious expression on his resolute face, and said that in order to be absolutely righteous, he must send troops immediately to destroy all these damn pirates. Xiao Berman nodded and echoed, "General Sakaski is right, you can't ignore these vicious scumbags. I propose to send a colonel from the headquarters to quickly rush to the East China Sea, to arrest all these people and bring them to justice." The ghost spider is holding a cigarette, and said viciously, "The beating of the sea loot is getting more and more rampant, and the Navy will not be released at all. In the eyes. For the sake of justice, we must strike hard, and we can no longer hesitate." The other Hawk generals nodded one by one and agreed. Aokiji did not remain silent, but yawned and said, "The East China Sea is a long way, and if we got there, the pirates would have already run away." Huo Shaoshan nodded, and then said a sentence, "General Kuzan was right, far water can't save near fire, these seas are not dead, it is impossible to wait there for the arrival of the Navy. Although this Chris is a young man with great potential, he is not worthy of such a big fight by the headquarters." Looking at the generals here, he said with a stern smile. Tautu sat quietly, not making a statement, and secretly sighed inwardly that Chris finally entered the sight of the Navy, and then it depends on how much he was rewarded. In the last conversation, Chris told her that before becoming a before Chihuahua, he will beat his reputation. After all, an unknown person suddenly killed Crocodile. There may be a fluke in the Navy. If the Navy uses this as an excuse to refuse him to join Chihuahua, then it will be a big loss. But don't be afraid now, Chris has attracted the attention of the Navy headquarters, and only needs to defeat Crocodile at that time. Then the position of Chihuahua is firmly seated. Let me give my opinion. At this time, Staff Officer Key held his chin with his hands, and his eyes flashed with wisdom. He slowly opened his mouth and said that it was still the same. After hearing her words, everyone stopped communicating, looked at her, and waited for her analysis. The name of the beetle, C. Xiaohei is about to express his opinion again, ha ha ha. Kagu looked at Staff Officer He and laughed loudly. The unscrupulous partridge ignored the old guy and said to himself, the Chris pirates, obviously, have been planning to go to sea for a long time. Unlike newcomers, it seems that they have entered the Great Waterway. All of them have very rich combat experience. The natural gas fruit and the superhuman sound wave fruit are all very powerful evil nightmare fruits. The staff slightly bowed his head to the right of the table, and said in a very affirmative tone, from according to the data, these crew members are ruthless and kill without blinking an eye. But they obediently obeyed Chris. This shows that the strength of this Chris must be extremely strong. Doberman just said that he sent the colonel to arrest him. If I expected it right, I would definitely lose this group of people. The strength, at least the major general of the headquarters, or even the use of the lieutenant general. In my opinion, the major generals are very difficult to face them. There is a possibility of defeat. He was named by the staff. Doberman was the first to speak, and said doubtfully, these rubbish, they have never entered Great Fairway. Moreover, it was unknown before, and no reward was offered at all. For the first time, the strength of the general level or above of the headquarters is dispatched. Is this too much? Ghost Spider nodded, took a breath, and said, I also think it's a big deal. There's no need to face a group of newcomers, and I haven't entered the Great Waterway and dispatched strength above the general level, which is discrediting the Navy. If we do this, we will undoubtedly reveal a fact to the outside world. The Navy is very incompetent in the face of pirates. Therefore, I personally think that it should not be used to the level of the general level. With his chair, Erlang's legs crossed, and his arms folded in front of him, Pulsolino still said strangely, young people today, it's really terrible. The old man was frightened to death. Qingzi made a rare speech, and said with a lazy face, the Crane's staff analysis is in place, we really need to pay enough attention to it. Sun Mouse nodded and continued, this is not a fuss, but this group of people is indeed different. Instead of sending a major general who is at risk, it is better to send a lieutenant general directly and arrest them all. Karp patted the table and laughed loudly, then send me, a lieutenant general, I don't know if this old man has the strength. Word, Sengoku glared at him and said, Bastard Garp, you want to go back to the East China Sea again, there's no way. Just stay in the headquarters for me, and I'm not allowed to go anywhere. When I heard it, Sakazuki made a sound with a serious look on his face. It is indeed a waste to dispatch the lieutenant general, but in order to implement absolute justice, it is reasonable to do so. For these rubbish, we should use the strongest force to destroy them ruthlessly, to see who dares to fight against the Navy. Warring States nodded, looked at the generals present, solemnly said. This group of people is too strong and full of potential. If they are allowed to enter the great and dirty realm, they will be troublesome at that time. Therefore, before they grow up, they must start in advance, and they cannot be given any chance. Now let's talk about who is willing to go. Sengoku turned to look at Karp and said coldly, you don't need to say anything, just stay with me. Karp laughed out loud, Warring States, don't keep holding on to me, this old man has been out of shape recently, how could he go back to the East China Sea, ha ha ha. The generals present looked at each other, and no one spoke the first time. After all, this job is thankless. Starting from the Navy headquarters and rushing to the East China Sea, the mountains are high and the water is far away, the day lily is cold, and the Chris pirates are not dead, they will move. If you go to pick it up, you will definitely have to catch up for a while before you can meet it. In short, this errand is really too boring. No one wants to go to Sister or Wang Qian's, so powerful, but unfortunately we are no longer the same as before. Relationship, alas. Teoman looked at the table silently, and sighed inwardly. For this wise old man, Teoman respects and loves her very much. Although the two of them are not sisters, their relationship is better than that of sisters. The staff took great care of her and always treated her as a younger sister. But now, he betrayed the Navy and went to the pirates' side. The two are already hostile. However, Tautu will not regret it, and firmly believes that everything he has done is the right one. Tianlong people have done wrong, and they are high above and oppressing the lives of people all over the world. In this era, we must usher in changes, and we can't go on like this anymore. All for justice. 075, Chris, the first reward, the highest in the world. I go. The ghost spider took a breath and said with a serious face, don't worry everyone, for absolute justice, I will definitely catch them all. Sakazuki turned his head and glanced at himself, nodded, and said with a stern smile. Poltrulino leaned against the chair, with Erlang's legs and his neck tilted, as always, trying to die. Even the ghost spider lieutenant general has gone out, the young man now is really too scary. Warring States looked at Ruogi Spider and said solemnly, if you go, I am very relieved, it's settled as it is now, let's discuss how these people offer rewards, especially that guy. Chris Cap laughed and said loudly. One sentence, Warring States, since the lieutenant generals have been dispatched, the reward must be several hundred million, ha ha ha. Flying Squirrel looked at Garp and said with a smile, Chris Pirate didn't enter the Great Channel, it's just a stronger newcomer. If you give them too high a bounty, this is undoubtedly the strength of the Yiyang pirates, and I don't think it's appropriate to do so. Doberman sneered and said casually, anyway, it won't take long for them to stay in the advanced city and offer a bounty, it doesn't matter how much. T-Dolphin shrugged and made a rare remark, saying, I think, although they have great potential, they are still newcomers after all. No matter how high the bounty is, it cannot exceed 100 million, and it must be below this. Huo Shaoshan showed a mild joke, and said very Kunshi, there are many threats to the Navy due to the case, the harm to the public, and the potential of the other party from the current situation. Chris High the band of thieves has never done anything to harm the people, and the impact is not that bad. However, they have great potential and pose a greater threat to the Navy, so the bounty can be relatively high. It's better to set 100 million directly, not too high, not too low. The generals of the Dovish faction all nodded and agreed. At this time, staff officer he spoke, nodded lightly, with wisdom in his eyes, and said slowly, Huo Shaoshan is right, I think 100 million is very appropriate. Hearing what the Magpie staff said, the generals of the Hawks didn't say much, and they all fell silent, so it was settled. Captain Chris offered a reward of 100 million Bailey. Sengoku was sour and knocked on the table, and the decision was made. Porosalino pouted and said strangely, it's terrible a newcomer, even offering a reward of 100 million bells, it scared the old man to death. Tautu silently looked at the table, and couldn't help but feel evil in his heart. With a sound, Chris is not ordinary, the first bounty was so high. Next, the meeting continued, and a bounty was placed on the people of the Chris pirates. Chris, above deck. Quack. The news bird is flying high and continues to deliver newspapers. As expected of the deputy captain, he has been staring at the situation of the sea, keeping an eye on the changes in the world at any time. Ajin stopped cultivating, looked at Lafitte, said indifferently, Shas glanced at him, and said disdainfully, I heard that you want to be the deputy captain, I laughed so hard. Just you nigga, do you have that power? Way ha 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 ha. Poison Q looked at Ajin with a weird smile, when I become the deputy captain, you can challenge me again, I'm very interested in you, hee hee. Hawkins was playing cards and said in a low voice, "Your face has not changed, you can't be the deputy captain." At this time, Lafitte smiled slightly, and said something very good. "The captain is in the newspaper, and we have finally been offered a reward." Hearing what he said, everyone immediately became interested, put down the things at hand one by one, and hurried away. "Come over." Bassos was the most anxious, and said quickly, "How much? Tell me how much I have been rewarded." Luo was still so aloof and said, "I'm just curious how much the bookmaster's bounty is." "So many, 1 billion Bailey." When he saw the newspaper, agents in different eyelids showed a shocked look, and the appearance of seeing a ghost really shocked him too much. In this place in the East China Sea, the highest bounty is 20 to 30 million Bailey K's own captain. For the first time, a bounty is offered directly. This is really incredible. As expected of the captain, it really is different. Hawkins nodded and said calmly, "As far as I know, no one has ever reached 100 million for the first time in the 4 seas. Bassos raised his arms high and said a sentence with great excitement. Lao Su offered a reward of 50 million Bailey, the first time the reward was so high. Wei ha 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 ha. Poison Q looked at the newspaper. King Cheng's face, a mysterious smile. "I have more than you, 70 million Bailey. Does this mean that 990 my strength is stronger than all of you?" Hehe Luo sneered and said unceremoniously, "Don't forget, there is also Lafitte. Our vice captain. There is a reward of 85 million Bailey, which is 15 million more than you." Ajin ignored their conversation, shook his head, and said with emotion, "Chang, you are all too strong for Captain Chris. 100 million, plus more than 80 million, and the others are tens of millions. That all adds up to more than 400 million. Ajin looked at them and said with great excitement, 400 million, what kind of concept is this? The pirates in the entire East China Sea don't have as much bounties as ours combined. I want to learn from you, I want to become stronger, and I want to have such a high bounty. Jinhai's face shows determination, swears, and speaks very honestly. At this time, Ajin is very fortunate that following these people, he will definitely become stronger and go farther, and let his name spread throughout the sea. 076. Bashes, work hard to improve your strength, or you will be slaughtered by me. Okay, let's hurry up and tell the good news to our captain, Mr. Lafitte, with a slight smile, holding the newspaper, and walking directly to the direction of the training room. Bassos looked at Poison Q with a look of indignation. Dissatisfied, he said, "You guys' bounty is actually more than that of Lao Su. Although you have never fought, but from the appearance, you are not his opponent." Hawkins said in a low voice, then walked to the side and continued to practice. Poison Q looked at Bashes, smiled very ugly and said, "Do you hear me? You are not my opponent." Hehe. Bassos glared at Hawkins' back, and shouted, "Hawkins, you are a motherfucker. Don't always say that when a man wants to talk, he relies on his fists. It's not about fate. Aren't you very good at fortune telling? Then do the math, are you my opponent?" And said coldly, "You are not his opponent, there is no doubt about this." Bassos was immediately angry when he heard this, raised his right high, and invited him to fight. You two, pretending to be a person every day. 5 people and 6, with a stinky eyelid, who to see? There is a way to find an island, let's fight, the loser, especially 233 Mother's words. Migan's voice came from the side, and said calmly, "Luo, this guy was stimulated by the bounty and lost his mind. Let's endure a little longer, wait until we enter the Great Waterway, and let him see our strength." Luo nodded, repeating what Hawkins said. Then, looking at Bassos, his eyes became extremely sharp, and he said in a cold tone, "Remember what you said today, don't forget it. Before entering the Great Channel, try to become stronger, or you may be slaughtered by me." After speaking, go directly to Hawkins and practice together. Beppo, who was sitting at the fish on the railing, cheered loudly, "Oh, Captain, no, sir, come on." Hadong grabbed the fishing rod, swept his tail, and said with a smile, "How many times have I told you, the boat's the captain can only be the boss of Chris. You can't keep shouting wrong, or you will be punished. Babo nodded his huge head and smiled. I'm already changing, and I'll definitely shout very smoothly in the future. Hearing Luo's words, Basharston was furious and said aggressively, damn it, don't everyone look down on Lao Su. Good, very good, when you enter the Great Waterway, I will not beat you all over the place to find your teeth, I will follow your surname. Every Q looked at him, smiled strangely and said, you have a very bright tone, but you can do it, Basha, your laser cannon, in front of me, it is a piece of garbage, can you hit me, if I want, poison you in minutes, hey. Jintao looked at them and said indifferently, everyone seems to have forgotten me, and I will become stronger and become an existence that you admire. On this sour ship, no one except the captain should convince me that you are better than me now, that's right. But I will work harder than you, and I will step on your feet and finish speaking, then walk to the side and start exercising. Basas was about to speak when Lafitte's voice came over. They're all very energetic. Lafitte turned his cane, and said very gentlemanly, I'm looking forward to you to challenge me, the position of deputy captain, I have prepared it for you. Seeing Lafitte's appearance, Basas didn't want to say more, and strode towards the railing, cultivating crazily in the training room. Hurry up, look at how much Chris has offered. Queen Sweetheart was wearing baccarat, with a look of anticipation on her pretty face, and she urged. Betty took a breath, with a rare expression of curiosity on her eyelids, and said lightly, it should be very high, this is Chris's strength. Leiju was still so gentle, she held her white chin in her jade hand and smiled, don't worry everyone, let's go right together. Fake BBEB, Rona floated in the air and was the first to see the number of bounties on it, she murmured with a shocked expression on her face. Billions. Karina thought she had read it wrong, so she read it twice, and said with the same surprised expression, terror, how come there are so many? The most shocking is Nami. Shimei Dian stared blankly at the Ming newspaper, her mouth slightly opened, completely stunned, and muttered these two words over and over again. After she came back to her senses, she shook her head and said with emotion, it's scary, it's really incredible. In the East China Sea, no, since I was a child, this is the first time I have heard that such a high bounty is really something that people can do. I can't believe it, I was really scared. The Queen of Sweetheart quickly turned her head and looked at the figure in front of her, smiling all over her face, and said with great excitement, Chris, the billionaire from your reward order. That's right, you heard it right, 100 million Baileys. Chris didn't look back, he continued to practice swordsmanship, and said calmly, I know seeing him like this. The girls looked at each other, shook their heads in unison, not knowing what to say. The sweet queen was hit the most. I report the situation happily, I am so excited, so proud, but this guy Chris, of course, actually behaved so calmly, I am speechless, I really have nothing to say. The Queen Sweetheart sighed and said with a wry smile, I'm full of blood, but people are so calm. This is Shibeti shrugging her shoulders, exhaling the smoke from her mouth, and saying lightly, it's okay, I'm used to it. It's us making a fuss. Karina grinned and said, Chris wants to be the strongest, only 100 million reward, drizzle. Perona danced in the air and nodded again and again, that's right, Haley, although it's true, but this is 100 million Baileys, why should I be surprised that Nami finds that her head is not enough? Chris, who is this person? I have some mood swings, so I don't see it, or I have too little knowledge. I was shocked to see Nami. I winked at May, and said with a smile, it's not like this. Chris' character is like this, calm and rational, no matter what happens, he is calm and will not be influenced by the outside world. From this point of view, this advantage is really good. I believe that all strong people are all like Chris. Let's not be surprised, what a big deal. Seeing that you guys are talking about Hancock's strength, it's really nothing to say. Lao Sha's strength is definitely stronger than her. Speaking of which, Lao Sha was defeated by the protagonist Halo. This guy's strength is not much worse than that of Brother Ming. 077. Chris, please save my country, Dressrosa. The kingdom of Demisrosa, inside the palace. Newspapers are coming. Violet walked gracefully with a newspaper in her hand and walked towards the family cadres. Toliapal sucked his nose and said with a big laugh, "Bring it here, Dover has been waiting for a long time Tilda, hee. Anyway, it's all those things every day, what's so good about it?" "Violette, the clothes you are wearing today are very beautiful." Violet put the newspaper in front of Doflamingo, turned his head to look at Diati, raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Diamante, you look very good today." Dialeondi waved his hands again and said very modestly, No, I won the prize. I'm in a normal state today, so I can't say how good it is." Violet nodded, pretending to be suddenly enlightened, and said with a smile, "That's what I saw wrong, I thought you looked good today." "If you say so, then I will admit it." Diamond nodded for help, and said seriously, "I look really good today, and I am in a very good mood." Jorah gave them both a blank look and said with a smile, "The two of you, are you here to act? This lady looks so disgusting, hoo. Gradius nodded, and said in a calm tone, "I saw this too, I felt very boring." Suddenly, Doflamingo turned back, covered his face and laughed, looking extremely arrogant. The gang was finally targeted by the Navy. When Fufu heard Brother Doflamingo's words, everyone was stunned for a moment, and quickly looked at the newspaper on the table. One by one Chris in black, a reward of 100 million Bailey is offered. Now, everyone understands. This is not the young man Doflamingo mentioned, he is called Chris. Violet's beautiful eyes lit up, a sweet smile appeared on her pretty face, and she said in a sweet voice, "Young master mentioned this person some time ago. Said that while arresting the traitor Trafalgar Ichiro, I met an interesting young man. I remember calling Chris Jorah to shake his fat body, laughing and saying, 'What a great young man.' For the first time, I offered a reward and hid it directly in a 100 million Bailey." Pika nodded, his voice was still so harsh, and said, "No wonder Dover said that, this guy really agrees with Yachty and Echoes." Without entering the Great Waterway, such a big wave was set off. It was really unusual that Tadumble leaned in front of Doflamingo, snorted his nose, and said quickly, I said. "Dover, are we really going to work with this kid? You are our king, how can you be a partner with my king, such a little devil?" Gradius nodded and continued, "If he wants to have a relationship with the Don Quixote family, this kid is really not as calm as Rauji, and said, in short, he is not worthy, GG. At this time, Doflamingo made a sound. "Think so. But after calming down and thinking about it, this guy's strength is indeed very terrifying." Doflamingo twitched his fingers and said with a grin, "When I fought against him, I was forced to the last step. Although I didn't use the ultimate trick, I can see that if the kid's terrifying strength really wants to fight for life and death, it's really hard to say what the final result will be." Fufu heard what Brother Doflamingo said. Everyone was really stunned. "We have been with Doflamingo for a long time, and we know him very well. He looks down on anyone and doesn't look down on others at all. But now, he admires this Chris so much. What this means, they are very clear. Since the young master said so, then this Chris is indeed very scary." Diaxianti looked at the young man on the newspaper and said with a serious face, "It is not easy to get the approval of the young master." Gradius nodded and laughed, "I really want to see him now and see what this guy has 3 heads and 6 arms. It's incredible to be so young and so powerful." Jorah twisted her body, covered her old face and said, "You said, take him as my man, how about it, hoo. Ask for flowers. So handsome, this Chris is really handsome, Miss Ben loves him so much." Pika looked at Doflamingo and frowned, but she still couldn't believe what he said. "Dover, he is definitely not your opponent. I believe that if you use a unique move, you will definitely be able to kill his mere kid. Why, it may be your opponent Totoball sucking his nose, laughing and saying, I said that Dover is the strongest man in the world, and he is destined to become the king, no one is his opponent, hey. Listening to their conversation, Violet didn't say anything. Maymew silently looked right at the newspaper on the table, as if she wanted to see this man clearly. This bastard, Flamenco, is arrogant and arrogant. He doesn't put anyone in this world at all. Since he said such a thing, it means that the battle at that time was definitely not the case. He must have tried his best at that time, but there was still no way for Chris to defeat him. In other words, Doflamingo, not Chris' opponent at all, Violet, combined with all the news he had heard, told Doflamingo the battle between Ming and Chris was divided into details. She firmly believed that her guess would not be wrong, and there was absolutely no problem in looking at Ruo Chris's photo again. She finally made a decision in her heart and must find a way to contact K. Reese, just get in touch with him and my country can be saved. At that time, the father and the king will reconsider the country, and the people will live and work in peace and contentment, and they will no longer be oppressed and bullied. Mother, you are in the sky, you must bless me with success. As long as the country can be restored to stability and the citizens can live a happy and beautiful life, I will sacrifice it, and it doesn't matter. Mother, you must bless me in the sky. 078. Chris, you put on a white suit and your concubine is going to marry you. The first half of the Great Waterway, above a certain sea area. In this exquisite and elegant room, standing in front of me is a beautiful woman. Chris, I miss you so much, I really miss you. The breeze was blowing gently, and Hancock's black and beautiful hair fluttered slightly, and some red clothes were slightly lifted, making her look very beautiful. What are you doing? Are you thinking about a concubine? Yeah, it must be. How about calling Chris now? No, Chris must be cultivating, and his concubine cannot disturb him. Hancock's beautiful eyes looked at the sea level outside, sparkling agent, blue as wash. The whole person fell into a fantasy, and he didn't know what he was talking about. He was talking to himself and telling the truth. If it were a woman, it would definitely make people feel crazy. He is a fool and can't stand Hanku. Kay's peerless face, she made this budding move, but it was very beautiful, and people were intoxicated when they saw it. The most beautiful woman in the world, no matter what she does, she is extremely attractive. At this moment, Marigold's voice came from outside the door. Sir, there is news from Chris. 11 shocked. Extremely shocked. Immediately, ecstasy. Hancock turned around quickly, with beautiful eyes, and hurriedly said, Come in and bite. Marigold and Sandersonia, two people walked in quickly, and they both knew very well that Hancock must really want to hear from Chris. Why don't he hesitate too much? Hancock didn't wait for the two of them to speak, and said eagerly, If you have any news, please tell Igia. Sandersonia strode up to Hancock and said with a smile, Sister, we just bought a newspaper and found news about Chris. Sister, please take a look. Handed the newspaper to Hancock, without saying much, let Hancock read it himself. After all, as long as it's about Chris, Hancock will understand it seriously, it's not just the two of them talking about it. Without any hesitation, Cook immediately opened the newspaper and quickly glanced at the photo of Chris. Hancock's beautiful eyes lit up, and he looked surprised at the danger of the country and the city. Chris is really in the newspaper. Oh yeah, it's really good. Rigorous Rudd and Chanda Sonia nodded and said with a smile, Yes, Lord Chris is in the newspaper, it's really a good thing. The two of them had a very good impression of Chris. Simply put, they regarded him as a brother-in-law and recognized his identity. Hancock ignored the words of the two of them, and said something handsome with a smile to himself. Really handsome. Hancock carefully watched the photos on the newspaper, from top to bottom, from left to right, to see Chris clearly and clearly. As expected of the man that the concubine likes, as expected, always so good-looking, the concubine really likes to die. Marigold and Sandersonia looked at each other, shrugged their shoulders, and felt helpless to their sister, staring at Chris's photo without reading the content of the newspaper at all. Like an idiot. The two of them knew that without a reminder, Hancock would have been looking at Chris's photo and couldn't have stopped. No way, Marigold could only speak, and said with a slight smile, "Sir, don't you read the news of Chris?" Sandersonia followed suit. "Yeah, Mrs. Sister, there's something new about Chris here." Sure enough, after being reminded by the two of them, Hancock suddenly woke up from the nympho state. Right, why did the concubine forget it? Speak for oneself. Carefully read the content. Marie Gopud and Sandersonia looked at each other again, with a wry smile on their faces. This sister, everything is fine, but she is too addicted to love. The whole person is really in the clouds. It's usually better, but as long as Chris is mentioned, my sister will fall into a fantasy and ignore everything, just talking about Chris, and the two of them can't stop talking about it. In this situation, I reported to Granny New, and she asked her to think of a way to make them speechless. Granny New came directly. There is such a proverb in the East China Sea, love is always stormy. Since Granny New said so, it's not easy for the two of them to say anything to Hancock. Let her talk to herself there every day. I don't know how long it took. Hancock's beautiful eyes were extremely bright, and on his flawless eyelids, he said something with a smile on his face. Impressive. Chris is really the best, much better than the body. When the body first offered the bounty, it was only 80 million. Cook's pretty face was full of respect and fear, and he muttered to himself, I have never heard of this concubine, there is such a high first reward in the world. Chris, you are so different, you are always the best, no one can compare to you, I like you so much, I really want to fall into your arms. In the middle, on the delicate and fair eyelids, there is a look of evil and I don't know what to think. This time, Margaret Zender and Sandersonia didn't remind them again, and let their sister dream there for a while. Hancock came back to his senses, looked at the two of them, and said firmly, Marigold, Sandersonia, we're going to speed up. Chris has been famous all over the world, let the whole world know his name. Igia can't be left behind, we must follow him, we must follow his footsteps and take over the next 833, we must also make a name and let everyone know the prestige of Ma Tong 100 contain. Yu Shok turned around slowly, looking at the blue sky and white clouds outside with her beautiful eyes. Her expression was extremely firm, and she continued, Igia must not hold back Chris, absolutely not. Marigold and Sandersonia nodded in unison, and quickly echoed. Madam Mistress, you are right, we will go down to inform now, speed up and head to the New World. After finishing speaking, the two did not stop, and walked directly to the door to Hancock, sat on Samaro, opened the newspaper, and reread the situation about Chris. She would be extremely focused and keep in mind live even a word, will not forget. This is about the sweetheart. In any case, be sure to watch Chris in Black several times. My concubine really likes this title. Oops, Chris was shot from this angle, so attractive. Right, if Chris was dressed in white, I don't know what would happen. In the future, Hao is wearing a white wedding dress, so he let Chris wear a white suit. It's so embarrassing. In the next time, Hancock's self-talking voice continued to sound in the room. Big guys, it's not the author. Mainly to reflect the beauty of Hancock. No way, she is too beautiful, the author Jun likes her so much that she even dreamed of it, so she wrote more. This is Han. 079. Whitebeard said, I haven't seen the eyes of a strong man for a long time. New World, above a certain sea. There's a big acid ship here, sailing fast, the Moby Dick. Come, the New Day's newspaper is here, whoever wants to read it, come over quickly. Marco took a stack of newspapers, came to Whitebeard, smiled and said something. Beasta always had a faint smile on his face, and said calmly, Marco, what's so beautiful about the sea? Izo wiped the flintlock gun and continued, the sea has been calm for so long, where is there any news? It's hard to say. Marco sat on the deck, his eyelids narrowed slightly, as if he hadn't woken up. After saying this, there is new news. Well, it was the first time I offered a reward of 100 million. It was the first time I saw him. The squad leaders were all stunned for a while. One by one, they stopped what they were doing and asked. Stand up. Joe said very little, and said rarely, Marco, did you read it right? How can there be hundreds of millions of reward criminals in the world? I have never heard of. Sachi nodded, very gentlemanly, I never heard of it either. After all, the 4 C's are too weak, and the bounty has never been too high. At this time, Titch came over and saw the reward amount on the newspaper. He couldn't help laughing. It's really 100 million Bailey, iron, ha 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 ha. Fosa shook his head with a puzzled look on his face, but he still couldn't believe it and said, it is terrifying to be able to offer a reward of 100 million Bailey without entering the Great Waterway. Bramank put his arms around him, smiled, and expressed his opinion. The Navy has always attached great importance to the amount of bounties, and will not offer bounties at all. That is to say, this young man named Chris is a threat to the Navy. The very big Lacchio shrugged his shoulders, and said quietly, although I said so, but this time the Navy is too generous for a person from all over the world. The first reward is 100 million, which makes other C's. Thieves, what do you think? Marco read all the content, and said sleepily, the Overlord of the North Sea has been killed. This guy doesn't need to take action against the Overlord of the East China Sea, and the battle is over. Afraid that the wanted order will come out, the Navy does not know what his abilities are and whether he has eaten devil fruit. Funny, what a mysterious kid. With an indifferent expression, Jin Guduo said, the members below, the bounty is tens of thousands. Altogether, it has exceeded 400 million Bailey. This is not a small number even in the New World. Vista nodded and said in agreement, Neptunium Chi fruit of the natural type and Sonic fruit of the superhuman type are both very good devil fruits. If this group of people enters the Great Waterway, there will be some waves, there is no doubt about that. If they can enter the New World, then the name of the supernova must be the name of Guo Yu, whose Joes put his arms around him and said calmly, it's another seed player, it depends on whether it can grow and sprout. Harda smiled. I must have said something. I personally think that this group of people will not fall so quickly, and one day in the future, they will definitely be able to hear their names again. At this time, Baikezi, who was sitting on the throne, said in a deep voice, Marco, Dad is also interested in bringing the newspaper, ha 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 ha. Tiki stood, opened his hands, raised his head and laughed. His voice was very loud. Fosa said with a slight smile, it can attract the attention of Dad, even if this Chris is killed, there will be no regrets. Yibo was still wiping the flintlock gun, and echoed, who said no, Dad, what do you think of the potential of this young man Chris? Marco handed the newspaper to Whitebeard, his eyelids half opened and half closed as always, with a lazy look on his face. Whitebeard did not answer, hanging a drip, looking down at the contents of the newspaper. After a while, he threw the newspaper aside, looking at these sons, he laughed and said, you have all seen the wrong way. Hearing what he said, everyone looked at each other, a little bit confused by what Whitebeard said, that Chris was not strong enough, he didn't have much potential, and Beasta looked at him, smiling gentleman and said, Dad, you're meaning, this young man doesn't have much potential and will soon fall, right? Judging from the appearance of Dad, this should be what he meant. Jinji Yu nodded with a serious look on his face. Harda frowned and said suspiciously, am I feeling wrong? I really think this young man is very strong and has potential. Marco waved his hand and said casually, Dad, I'm afraid that this young man doesn't think we underestimate this guy. His potential is even greater than we thought, and the Whitebeard grinned with a look on his face. Looking forward, he said, this kid is more terrifying than you think. Speaking of which, I haven't seen the eyes of a strong man from a young man for a long time. This kid named Chris has sharp eyes and a demeanor that is unique to the strong man. He is really an interesting kid, and there will be more in the sea in the future. The number one person is now, and the captains of the Gu La La Cheer squad have been recruited by the Shock. Who is Whitebeard? That is the strongest man in the world. If he said it himself, how high the gold content is in it, there is no need to say more. The meaning is that this Chris is really not simple. I'll just say, this young man is not very beat up. Hearing Whitebeard's comment, Harda smiled and was very happy that this big man, Joes, had a rare look of expectation on his eyelids, and said calmly, Dad's ability to see people has never been wrong. This young man seems to know that we will continue to pay attention in the future. Vista nodded, with a smile on his face as always. How long has he been in agreement? It has been a long time since Dad praised the young man like this. Chris, I will definitely continue to observe later to see where he can go. Kay leaned back on the chair and said sleepily, Dad hasn't praised the newcomer for at least 10 years, and this Chris is indeed the only one. With such affirmation from his father, how could this little 3.7 ghost be able to become a general? Bang Chi looked at these squad leaders, laughed and said, isn't this very interesting? In the new era, there should be new people to join, ha 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 ha. Fosa shrugged his shoulders and said with a wry smile. Although he didn't know why Dad was so sure, there was definitely no problem with Dad's words. It's really terrifying, such a young kid has such a huge potential, it's really more popular than people. Brahmank said with a smile, don't worry, we are waiting for them in the new world. I believe they will come in a short time. Oh wait though, the redhead said, confirmed his eyes, he is a very strong person. New world, Thelinia. This is an inaccessible island. At this time, a lot of people gathered here and the sound of footsteps came. I saw a dark-skinned man with a stack of newspapers in his hand. Rockstar walked over quickly and looked at Shanks. He laughed and said respectfully, Captain, newspaper tilde here you are, can the captain read the newspaper? Give it to the deputy captain. Lackey. Lou took a bite of the roasted meat, looked at it with small eyes, said with a smile on his face, Shanks in a tree trunk, laughed and said, when I see the text, my brain hurts to death, how can I go on seeing it? Anyway, there is Beckman, so you don't have to worry about anything, just sleep honestly, ha ha ha. Beckman took a cigarette and took the newspaper. He didn't say a word about his character. Captain, an interesting thing happened in the East China Sea, won't you get up and listen? I don't know how long it took. Beckman put down the newspaper gently, took a breath, and said something to Shanks. Lou's fat face, with a curious look, hurriedly asked, what's the matter? Interesting thing, say it quickly. By the way, I remembered, isn't there a little guy in the East China Sea, are you talking about Luffy? Rockstar looked at Lackey all the way and asked suspiciously, Lord Lackey, who is Luffy, why have I never heard of it? Not to mention, when Beckman mentioned the word, Donghai, Shanks' nerves were immediately touched. He quickly sat up, looked at Beckman, laughed and said, you bastard, talk about it, and what are you talking about, Luffy is not in the newspapers. Beckman spit out the smoke from his mouth, expressionless, and said lightly, yesterday, a big event happened in the East China Sea. A young man named Chris was offered a reward of 100 million Bailey, shocked the world and became the highest reward in the 4 seas. Hearing what he said, everyone was stunned, at a risk of not believing that Jesus Bu was born in the East China Sea, where he knew the most. He quickly shook his head and said in denial, how is this possible? The East China Sea is the weakest sea area. There are only a few pirates with a bounty of tens of millions, and there are only a few of these little devils named Chris. How could it be possible to offer a reward of 100 million? Becky, did you see it wrong? Lajalu nodded and continued, yes, in the 4 seas, when has there been a bounty of 100 million, it does not exist. Shanks looked at Baker and couldn't believe it, is it 100 million Bailey? Then this newcomer is very amazing. If I remember correctly, in the 4 seas, the first reward is not so high. Baker took a breath and said calmly, although I don't really believe it, it's the truth. As you all know, the Navy has always paid great attention to the bounty, and will only lower the amount, it is impossible to raise it. So the real bounty for this young man must be more than this amount. Beckman has a very high IQ, and his eyes are constantly shining with the light of wisdom. He exhaled the smoke from his mouth. He calmly said that the Navy can give such a high bounty, which shows how huge the potential of this Chris is. If I expected it right, the Navy will definitely send the troops from the headquarters to start arresting this group of people, and the Navy sent out is probably not low level. At least the Major General level. Rockstar spread his hands and said with a smile, Baker, Your Excellency, that's just a newcomer in the 4 seas, and shouldn't be dispatched to the level of a major general. A newcomer who has not gone through the great and conscientious way. No matter how great his potential is, his combat effectiveness will definitely not be much higher. Domineering in the armed and domineering in the sight, these are definitely not used, they are really weak and poor lackey. Lu took a bite, chewed and said, yes, I see Beckman the same way, you always analyze it. I'm very prepared, but this time it's too exaggerated to deal with a newcomer and dispatch the Major General of the headquarters. How could the Navy waste its fighting power? Jesus B.U. nodded, frowned and said something. A reward of 100 million Bailey is already incredible. As for sending the generals of the Haruka headquarters to hunt down, this is a big deal, but in any case, the Chris pirates are indeed very powerful. Everyone in the world is attracted by them, and they will definitely pay attention to this group of people silently. Shanks laughed out loud, very forthright, as if we were not shocked by the shock. Please, Flowers 0. Don't tell me, this kid named Chris must be very strong. Shanks looked at the picture on the newspaper and looked at Chris's eyes, and his expression became very serious and said in a deep voice. Such eyes are not something a person can have. If there is not enough strength, or lack of potential, it is impossible to show. It seems that another big man is about to appear in the sea, ha 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 ha. Beckman exhaled the smoke from his mouth, calm and rational as always, and said without a smile, next, we will see if they can escape the pursuit of the Navy. If they succeed, then this era is destined to leave their name, and no one can stop it. I have to say that this move made by the Navy headquarters really pushed Chris to the tide of the times and made his reputation spread all over the sea. Not only Hancock, Whitebeard, Shanks, but also many pirates got this shocking news. The whole world seems to be discussing around him. It's amazing, it's so scary to be able to offer a reward of 100 million bells before entering the Great Waterway. Going out to sea, Lao Su will also go out to sea, and Lao Su will also be famous all over the world. In such rubbish waters as mad in the East China Sea, there are even pirates with bounties exceeding 100 million. What is Lao Su still doing in Beihai? Go to the sea and immediately go to the Great Waterway. Oops. When did Donghai have such a high bounty? It's really amazing. Now Donghai is going to be famous. Hoo hoo hoo. Are these people in the Navy stupid? A person who has not even entered the Great Waterway, even offered a reward of 100 million Bailey. The Navy's really special mother eats shit. Lao Su worked so hard and only offered a reward of more than 90 million yuan. Why should a newcomer offer a reward of more than 100 million yuan? Where is the Mad Chris pirates? I want to join them, I want to be famous, ha ha ha.